It's time. All right, and we are live. What is up, everyone? This is OJ over here from PlayerEssence. Welcome to another debate that we have here, but this time I will not be actually in the debate. I'll be moderating it, and we have two fellows here, one on one side and one on the other. We're going to have a nice and respectful debate on the topics, and the topic for this video kind of came based off of something that ShadowFox has been doing on his channel. In addition to that, something that Antonio had to say on one of my videos, saying that the Nintendo Switch is based off of 2006 specs, or it's closer to 2006 than it is as far as where we are at this point, which would be 2015, 2016, however architecture or technical terms you want to put it in as far as devices that are coming out. So very interesting as far as that comment goes. We had a little misunderstanding as far as who you were addressing to on the video, but I think we've cleared that up, and we're here to talk about it respectfully with another guy here. So ShadowFox, what's up, man? How you doing today?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing good. I can't complain. I cannot complain. And Antonio, how are you doing today, man?
I am good.
Good. All right. So first, let's start off with what Antonio you said. I want you to discuss your comment that you left, saying that the system, as far as Nintendo Switch, is more based on 2006 specs. Can you elaborate on that? And do you actually mean what you said?
Okay, I need to clarify because I know that wasn't the most clearest comment in the world. What I said it was comparable, not exactly precise. What I got that from is every time I go on YouTube or just do a Google search and I try to look up the Switch specs, because I am ignorant when it comes to Nintendo, because I'm just a gamer, not a Nintendo fan, not a Sony fan, not an Xbox fan. I'm just a gamer. But every time I looked at a video, all I saw was people comparing it to the 360 and the PS3. And that had me scratching my head. Why are they comparing it to a system that's not even on the market? That's old technology. They should be comparing it to the PS4 and the and the Xbox One, but they don't make that comparison. That's where the root of that comment came from. And it was not addressed to you, but to the commenters in the comment of that video. Usually when I address a person, I put a plus their name to tag that person, letting them know I'm talking directly to them, not to just the commenters.
Understandable. So what you're saying is that you're not actually thinking that the system is based on 2006 specs, but you're thinking that every time you search it, people are comparing it to that. So is that what you're saying?
Correct. Like there's a digital founders video where within the first 7 minutes, they're comparing the X1 chip to the PS3 and the 360.
Okay. So ShadowFox, why do you think this is the case as far as them comparing it to Xbox 360 and PS3? And do you feel it's going to be around that level based on what you know?
I feel that comparison is being made, and I think people are literally, because of their own misconceptions and their lack of a grasp on technology, they latch on to whatever keywords they can that make them feel like they're understanding what's being said. So the comparison that Digital Foundry made was in regards to what they think, and this is all based on rumor because we don't know what's official and what isn't official. What they think the Nintendo Switch would end up having in forms of generic G-flops or teraflops with regard to the amount of power draw the system is going to have total, and based on what type of architecture they think that the system is going to have. So based on the old Tegra X1 or whatever, which was based on Maxwell architecture, it only had 256 CUDA cores. So they take that, they add the math to that based on the clock rates that they think they have based on low power mode, and they come up with that, and they end up with something around the 200 gigaflop range, and they directly compare that to the 200 to 300 gigaflops on the 360 and PS3. That's where the comparison is coming from. And then people completely ignore the fact that that's not the only clock rate the system is going to run at based on said rumors. So there's a little bit of that going on. And I guess nobody watched the video that I made regarding it. So they have no idea of what to understand and what not understand. They just see a lot more people on YouTube that have no idea what's going on, and they're just regurgitating the same information.
Understandable. So, in your response to that, Antonio, do you still feel that it's more based off of 2006? Is that like your word as far as what you're saying? How do you feel on it at this point?
Well, I still feel like I need some more evidence to counter what I said, even though I'm not 100% sold on what I said. I'm still looking for information, because I know I'm not the smartest guy in the world, especially when it comes to Nintendo news, because I'm not a Nintendo guy. But
this isn't Nintendo. This is just technology in general. It doesn't matter who makes it. It's based on that information altogether. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, based on what you just said, well, with the comparison, that is all rumors, yes, but that's the low end of what we know of the Switch. So we can't neglect the low end and just only look at the high end.
Okay. ShadowFox, what's your response to the actual going off of what he's saying, the low end or the specs that we have? Is that really based off of 2006? Is it that low end?
No, because time frames do not match. How can I say this? Time frames do not match floating point calculations, which is what we're looking at, right? So G-flops that's the amount of floating point operations that the GPU can handle, generally speaking, in total. That's based on what they're looking at. Is not painting the whole picture, because you're talking about a custom IC that's got a bunch of different chips on it, and not just the CUDA cores if they're there or whatever. It could be something completely different, because this is a custom system that they're designing specifically for Nintendo. But based on the information that they have, which is just one piece of information at this point, well, actually two, what they assume the CUDA cores are and the clock rate, they're just using those two to come up with the number. But we don't know what else is on the system. And I already mentioned this in my other video. I mean, there are other things that could be there in that system that completely alleviate the need for having more CUDA cores or having a higher clock rate. We don't know that yet.
So what would be those things? Like, for example, like what would they put into in order for it, like, to be better than what you're saying as far as what they have at this point? What could they possibly do, since you do know tech a little bit?
The simplest thing would be kind of the same thing they did with the GameCube when it first came out. The CPU for it was the CPU that how can I say this? The CPU that IBM was selling directly to vendors for routers and switches and casino machines and stuff like that was infinitely inferior to what Nintendo had done once they got with them. They added so many custom registers that it was indistinguishable from the original design. And that's a simple thing. You could do something as simple as saying, we will have more registers per CUDA core on this system versus what comes out in the regular Tegra. Just something that simple could exponentially increase the floating point performance on that system. And we also don't know if whatever CPU this is, we don't know if that will handle floating point performance as well and handle its own geometry and stuff like that. And we know Nintendo likes to do that type of thing. So we have no idea really.
So let me ask you a question then with that. With the PS3 and the Xbox 360, as far as what we know at this point, what's the defining thing where you feel is the biggest difference between the two? Because like obviously we can look at the rumored amount of RAM, right? So 4 gigabytes of RAM, that plays a factor into things. But what else is a bigger differentiator between the two at this point?
For 360 and PS3, as far
compared to the Nintendo Switch.
Oh, compared to them?
Yes.
Well, first of all, you're talking about a more modern architecture. Even if it wasn't Maxwell and it was a generation before that, it's still more modern than this. It has way more instructions already built in, so you don't have to worry about stupid things like as far as like single precision or double precision floats. That type of stuff, as far as determining that type of stuff, that math is already there. In terms of understanding things such as whether you're going to be a unified shader, whether you're going to be a shader designated just for textures or just for volumetric calculations or transforms, that type of stuff has already been unified for this architecture going forward. That was something that happened right after the Xbox 360. It had unified shaders, but the memory pool wasn't exactly perfect for that scenario. So now you have systems now coming out with 1 gigabyte or more of memory, and that's not an issue anymore. Also, you have things such as different types of buffering, and I talked about that in my video as well. And since most engines are adaptive by nature these days, and just about any game you have can be ported to a phone, it really doesn't matter anymore with regards to that. If a developer wants to put a game on that platform, they can do it.
Got it. Okay, well, Antonio, what's your response as far as what he's saying in comparison to the two, since you were saying more like, well, you're kind of seeing as a 360 to PS3 thing. Anything that you have to say to respond to that?
Well, I'm hearing a lot of things that's going over my head, and I have to admit that I'm not gonna say and pretend like I'm as smart as I need to be, but it sounds reasonable. I do know that the Switch has more RAM than the 360 and the PS3. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
but my concern is overall, not just each parts of the system. I'm thinking about the whole unit.
And that the whole unit is the problem, because we don't know. All we know is the 3 things that they decided to divulge. And when you're dealing with custom hardware, you need to know everything, because CPU clock speed and GPU clock speed they're not even one half of the story. And I guess that's more of the error that a lot of these YouTubers are making right now.
You say that they're making an error by just talking about the clock speeds. Why are they making that error, ShadowFox?
Well, most gamers, the first thing they do is, the graphics. So the first thing they think about is the graphics card. They don't understand that not only are games drawn per frame, everything has to be written back to memory at some point and read in a reasonable fashion repeatedly over and over again. So for every frame, you're drawing anywhere between, up to 16 megs worth of frame buffer, and then you're deleting it and starting it all over again so it can sit somewhere in a buffer to be shown to your display. That's generic computer display 101. Your computer that you're using right now is doing this every frame, whether you know it or not. So as long as whatever game engine Nintendo or whoever else that wants to develop for Nintendo's hardware is able to sufficiently do that without any drawbacks, then that suffices. And it got to the point where back in the GameCube days, Nintendo had the timing down so perfectly, because they had been developing for 480i and 480p for the better part of 2 decades. They had the timing down they had the memory timings down to 1/3 of the memory clock of both the CPU and the GPU, because they knew each and every other frame would be written by that time frame. So if you go back and you look at the clock speeds, 485 for the CPU, was it 162 for the GPU, that was intentional, because they were 1/3 of each other, as well as the frequency for the memory. So that same thing could be happening. It also happened with Wii U and Wii as well. That same thing could be happening with this new hardware that NVIDIA is making for them. So you'll look at things like, you'll see, oh, well, these numbers are a lot smaller or whatever. Well, these numbers are a lot smaller, but every single time a clock cycle happens, everything is happening. There are no misses. There are no, because a lot of CPU cycles that happen on any type of computing device, if the software is not designed for it, if the firmware is not designed for it perfectly in tune, you end up with a lot of errors. I want to say a good 25 to 60% of all CPU clock cycles are errors that are thrown back, or memory that isn't being used. So it just sits there, gets thrown back, and it waits for the task again. If you're able to match your software to that hardware, and a lot of those misses are alleviated, you don't have to have 4 gigahertz for your CPU. You don't have to have a buttload of RAM if it's all being used the way it needs to. And that's kind of why they design their memory hierarchy the way that they do. They start with a really fast EDRAM or ESRAM or whatever in the Xbox One's case, specifically for a frame buffer. Then they have main memory, and then they have some type of L3 cache for their CPU. It's all done to make sure that the game program, because a video game console is essentially just a customized computer that runs a program that's just a game. As long as that runs efficiently as possible, it doesn't matter what the specs are at that point. How well will the game run? We're not talking about a computer here. We're not buying computers. We're buying a custom system specifically for one application.
Okay, definitely a lot of information there, but I caught most of it as far as what you were trying to say. So, Antonio, do you have any response to what ShadowFox had to say based on what they can do basically customization-wise with the GPU and the CPU? Do you have any response to that?
I was actually able to follow that part because that sounds similar to what goes on with Intel when they make their Xeon processors. They're not clocked as high as their i7 or i5 class because they don't need the CPU to be clocked as high because they have hardware built into those processors to alleviate those errors. That's why you have to have ECC RAM. At least that's what I got from what he just said. My concern now is...
Excuse me, did you say ECC RAM?
Error
Yeah,
correcting.
ECC, error correcting modules. Yeah.
Okay, got it. I just want to clarify that.
That is accurate, yes.
Okay.
Okay, my concern now is if Nintendo has their specs down to basically how Apple do with their products. They tweak everything to work within their universe to work well. That's why Android has specs far above Apple products, but Apple products still feel smooth to the consumer who's using it. How would that work with when a developer make a game for the Android, well, in this case, PS4, Xbox? How would that transfer over to the Switch if its specs are that low?
They would have to go back to essentially what Nintendo's always been doing. And that's NES, Super NES, N64. All those platforms were all designed the exact same way Nintendo programs their games. Developers then, because they had no choice, they developed games the way Nintendo did. Now, going forward, apparently, from some of the rumors and stuff that we've been hearing, apparently this system is going to be very, very developer focused. So hopefully things like that were under the table that a lot of people didn't talk about with regard to Wii U, hopefully the licensing fees are cheaper. Hopefully the costs, hopefully they can talk to some of these port houses, because a lot of these port houses were charging an arm and a leg to convert stuff because they knew big publishers would pay that amount of money. Hopefully Nintendo has talked to those guys and say, hey, you guys that customize specifically for our stuff to port stuff over to our stuff, could you charge a little bit less and we'll work it out in the middle? That kind of stuff, those kind of deals that aren't technical at all, those are the type of things that need to be in place. And from what I understand, that's going to happen all the way to the point of them talking to Epic and getting their engine being on their platform. Because Epic has never really fully supported any of Nintendo's hardware. It was individual developers porting their engine to their hardware. So now that it's quote unquote going to have native support, that bodes well. But it's Nintendo hardware, so we don't know how long that'll last either.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I've seen, especially when it comes to Switch, will it be able to handle certain games or not? I think there's a misnomer, or there's a not necessarily a misnomer, but there's a misunderstanding out on the internet that says, oh, well, the Wii U, since it wasn't powerful enough, it didn't get this, and this, which I guess maybe you can say in some instances. But I honestly believe that if the Nintendo Wii U actually sold like a lot better, I think it would have got a lot of stuff. That's my personal opinion on the matter, because what I saw from third-party developers when certain games, even stuff like Tomb Raider, that did not come to the Wii U. Stuff like Metal Gear Solid, that did not come to the Wii U. So these are games that were on PS4, Xbox One, and on PS3 and Xbox 360 but for some reason they didn't come to the Wii U. And Metal Gear Solid 5 is considered to be one of the greatest technical, games out there, right? As far as graphics wise, for the open world, it's one of the best looking games, and it's on PS3 and 360. So I don't understand. This is just me saying here. I don't understand when people say, "Oh, well, it won't be able to run on this system," when developers took one of the best looking games, Metal Gear Solid 5, and easily made it on the PS3 and 360 in 720p, 30 frames per second with their Fox engine. So I don't. And how many more games are going to look better? How many third-party games, even going forward, look better than Metal Gear Solid 5 at this point? I mean, Antonio, can you think of any? And ShadowFox, both of you guys can chip in. Like, how many more games out there look better than Metal Gear Solid 5 that was also on PS3 and 360? And how many other games out there, like, for example, Rise of the Tomb Raider? Now, the 360 version is a bit rough, but it's still on there. So Rise of the Tomb Raider, one of the best looking games on Xbox One, is also on Xbox 360. So I see what you're trying to say, Antonio, and I understand, like, yes, developers want to have certain specs in their games. They want to make sure that it looks as good as they can. But I mean, why is the PS3 and 360 getting some of the most graphically intense games if power was the only issue? And these are some of the best looking games of this generation currently. So why are these games on PS3 and 360? So I just want to get you guys' thoughts on that. Antonio, you want to go first?
Okay, my guess is based on experience. They've had almost 10 years with the PS3 and the 360. So they already knew the code. They knew how to program the games for it. Whereas with the Wii, I think it's still using Power PC. So they have to recode it. It's not coded the same as the 360 and the 360. Now, I know with the PS3, I thought PS3 was cell architecture.
That's a power core.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know they had the first 4 years they had to learn how to code for the PS3.
Yeah. So and a lot. I'm glad you said that, because there are a lot of people that don't know this. All three, well, and I won't say from the same generation because they're not, but yes, all three from the 7th generation, the Wii, PS3, and Xbox 360, all use the CPU from the same vendor. They were just created in different ways. And actually, the Xbox 360 CPU, the tri-core CPU, is one of the 7, I guess we call SPEs, that the cell had. So it basically took 3 of the 7 SPEs from the PS3 and made those 3 cores for the Xbox 360. So they were all essentially using the same hardware, the same instruction set. So it at the end of the day, nobody could say I don't understand this, because those CPUs behave very similarly.
Okay, that's new. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, they are. If you just do a quick Google search and look on Wikipedia for the Sony Cell processor, and you'll see that IBM developed it.
Now, I'm not trying to call you a lie. It's just that I've never heard it, so I have to do my research to confirm.
Yeah, it is. It is. They are obviously they're customized, and the cell itself could run geometry and stuff a lot better. But at the end of the day, if you just if you want it to run main code in C, they will all initialize the same way.
So let me ask a question then. So do you feel, ShadowFox, based on what you're saying, is that, I mean, I think obviously sales played a factor into this, but do you think potentially the Wii U gamepad also played a factor into developers just saying we don't want to deal with this type of quote unquote gimmick?
I won't say the gamepad was, because the Sony and Microsoft were already prepared to do it as well. And there are still games like the Fallout still uses the Pip-Boy second screen experience, if you will, basically laughing in the face of the Wii U. Like, we're not going to port it to the one system that should have had this. So it's clearly could be used there. Dead Rising 3 used that type of support as well. So it was clearly already looked at, and it was possible, and developers continue doing it, just not on Nintendo's hardware. So I'm beginning to think, instead of technical, and I won't say I begin to think I've always thought this, is more business decisions more than anything else, more so than hardware. Because there were literally no excuses once the Wii U was announced, because all the developers that have been working on PS3 and 360 all this time, there was the same familiar CPU architecture as well as a newer GPU architecture that could run those 360 and PS3 games with full frames and not torn frames. So you would actually get VSync in your games in addition to it being on the second screen. That should have been a easy boon for developers to come right on over. However, we saw what happened. So the power thing, I made this statement at the end of my last video, and I really believe this to be the case. I think Nintendo Switch could be announced 2 weeks from now, and Nintendo will say this is a brand new set of Kepler cores that we've custom made with NVIDIA. We have they're 3 gigahertz a piece, and there are 6 of them. We have 12 gigabytes of RAM, and we have a GPU at about 1.5 gigahertz, and it gives you roughly about 4.5 teraflops of compute performance. The same developers that didn't sign up already wouldn't sign up for that either. And that's not because of the hardware or their engine being possible. Developers, at the end of the day, they don't have a say-so of what project they're working on. The publisher does. You have to convince the publisher to do it. The publisher has the check. Publishers don't care about specs. I think that was the big thing. That was the big takeaway that I wanted everybody to know by the end of the video that I made. At the end of the day, like, you can listen to all these quote unquote negative things that weren't really from developers. They're more from like marketing PR guys. Once you start looking into the weeds and finding out where these quotes were coming from. And once you actually find a developer that talks about anything, they don't have a say-so in anything. They're too busy working on the project. They have a project manager breathing down their neck, and they have a publisher that's like, where's my money? Give me my product.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of see what you're going with that, but I wanted to give Antonio a chance to respond if he wanted to say anything based on what ShadowFox just had to say, and then I'll kind of chip in.
Okay.
When it comes to publishers, I'm ignorant on that. I'm not even gonna pretend like I know what goes on with developers and publishers. I'm only thinking from a consumer standpoint, because a lot of people like to say that specs don't matter. In a way it does, in a way it doesn't. If your specs are too low, it really does matter, because you can't. I'm not really concerned about graphics, because that's like on the lower end of my interest. I'm more concerned with story and gameplay. But I'm concerned with certain features. Like with Call of Duty, when I got it for the Wii, they had features cut on it, even though the 360 and the PS4 was supposed to be inferior to the Wii U. Yet those got the full games, and the Wii U got GIMP games. That's my concern with low specs.
Can you clarify what you just said? Because you said the PS4 and the Xbox,
PS3 and the Xbox 360
got more features than the Wii U. The
Correct.
Wii U version. Yeah, correct. Those versions definitely. I don't think there's any debate there. Those versions, as far as that goes,
the Wii U got DLC like almost 2 years later.
Yeah, and like, but I think also that's on Nintendo on that one, and I don't think that's necessarily a power thing, which I don't think you're going in that way, but that's on Nintendo to make the system, as far as features wise. Nintendo's the way that they set up the system, and maybe ShadowFox can help me out on this one or clarify, maybe to add something on from a technical standpoint, because I know you've spoke on this before. But the way that Nintendo made the system, it just wasn't built for online, is my opinion, as far as interaction online. Like, a lot of the stuff was segmented. Like, for example, if you wanted to send a message to someone, you can't just send a message from the OS level. You have to boot up a Miiverse message and then send it to them from there. There's no actual on-screen notifications telling you what you're getting. There's many things that are very weirdly put on the Wii U. Now, the developers, from what I saw, tried to do their best to help with that, so you can have in-game friend invites for Black Ops, for example. But the problem is that if someone's playing a different game, good luck getting a hold of them. Nothing's going to pop up on their screen saying, hey, you have an invite to play Black Ops 2 with something else. So you led to a lot of, disconnect between you and your friends. If they were playing Mario Kart and you want them to hop onto a game, good luck trying to get their attention. They're not going to look at a little flashing light on Miiverse to go check on there. And there's nothing that will actually suck them into the game if it's actually in their tray. So, I mean, I agree with you there. There was definitely multiple issues, which I've been very, 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 very vocal about on my channel. My users have unsubbed to me. Some of my, not all my users, but a lot of my subscribers have unsubbed to me based on how much I've complained and whined about the Wii U's OS and online features. So, I mean, I feel you there. But ShadowFox, do you have anything to add to that based on what me and Antonio are saying?
No, we spoke on that before. And so the gist of it is this: at the time when this console was being planned and the OS was being planned, the 7th generation was at a crossroads. Slowly but surely, more and more third-party developers wanted a piece of the pie with regards to online content, to the point where Microsoft was working out deals to where EA and some other companies or whatever basically have an app within the game that you prescribe to and you would sign into. Like, even now, you can still sign into your EA Access account to get different features or whatever outside of Xbox Live. And at the time, Nintendo, they had already saw, previously with Wii and GameCube, there was no point in them getting into that whole, we're going to lock down the online functionality if these developers wanted to have it done in different ways. So their intention was to either partner up with a major third party to do their entire online for them, which was one of the things that before they decided to go with GameSpot for all their servers and stuff, they were actually talking to EA at one point. That was actually, I think there was an IGN podcast. I think that actually confirmed that, because one of the EA guys was on there. I think it was actually Julian Egerbrecht that let it slip during the interview or whatever. But that was actually talked about, that at some point there were multiple versions of both the Wii and the Wii U with different types of hardware there, and they were being shopped around. The OS at a system level was going to point to whatever the provider was going to be with regards to the online access, be it Origin or Ubisoft or whoever it was going to be or whatever, and that would be the interface for everything that you would see. Well, when whatever happened between Nintendo and EA happened, Nintendo had to come up with a plan, so they merged with ITV or whatever. They cut a deal with ITV, and they cut a deal with GameSpot to try to finagle and see what they were going to do with their service. And that's how Nintendo TV was born, Miiverse was born, all that kind of stuff. And since they developed it that way, kind of last minute, you could tell if you bought a Wii U at launch, you could tell it was last minute. Mm-hmm. Miiverse, We Connect 24, which ends up being, I forget what they call it now. I don't know. Nintendo Network is what it's called now. And all the other functions that connect you to another user were completely segmented. And they were never intended to be that way, but ended up being that way because at the time, it was rumored that both that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo would not be hosting their own online networks in the future because the third parties were wanting it so bad. And once that happened and people saw what happened with Wii U, Sony and Microsoft said, no, we're not doing that. So that's pretty much that. And that wasn't hardware based, because clearly you could still do that on a game to game basis. You can get game invites and stuff like that in other games, but they won't talk across Miiverse unless they code that in. So they would literally have to create an environment in Miiverse or a community in Miiverse that would accept that code. And whenever you send an invite, it creates a message on Miiverse so people can see it. And I don't think that's happened yet, but I believe it's possible still. I thought the Shovel Knight developers were talking about it a little bit before they released their game, and I don't think it ever happened. So you're able to send messages, but you're not able to send. It's not multiplayer anyway, but that would be the closest that they would get.
Got it. So, kind of going back on like what you said there. I mean, I think all of us can kind of say that Nintendo definitely needs to, improve when it comes to the features and things like that. And I think going with NVIDIA and with as far as the GeForce experience, those are probably going to be things that's going to greatly help with that. So I do want to ask one more thing here, and I'll wrap this up. This isn't going to be too long beforehand. Antonio, I want to get your take on as far as the RAM goes. Do you feel that 4 gigabytes of RAM for the Nintendo Switch is too low in comparison to the PS4 and Xbox One?
For graphics, no. For everything, I'm still a little concerned. I feel 4 gigabytes is definitely enough to pull off 1080p 60 frames per second. I see no need to go above that. I have a 4K, well, not 4K. It can do 4K. It's a 1070, a GTX 1070. It can do 4K, but I'm perfectly fine with 1080p. So I think 4K is good enough for that. My concern is when it's shared with the OS, how much is the OS using of the 4K? If the more features you use, the more RAM is going to require to use those features. So I need to hear more about how Nintendo is going to deal with that.
Okay, so ShadowFox, what's your take on that? As far as only 4 gigabytes of RAM, that caused a firestorm as well. People say that that's not enough. People comparing it to the PS4 and Xbox One, they have 8 gigabytes of RAM, so that means it's so much better, right? So what's your take on that as far as the RAM?
First, let me clear the first misconception. Main memory, which is what we're talking about, 4 gigs or whatever, does not dictate what resolution your console can support or your computer system can support. It's how much VRAM you have that supports that. And as long as you have anywhere between 16 to 32 megs of that, you have a full complete frame buffer for 1080p and beyond. 32 megs is actually enough for 4K. Now, with that out of the way, because that's going to be a slice of the main memory or custom eDRAM that Nintendo decides to buy to be on that GPU that's separate, that obviously wasn't talked about, which makes me question this whole Digital Foundry thing from the beginning, because that's important and that should be part of the quote unquote leaked specs, and they didn't mention it. But anyways, with regards to main memory, if the OS is as light as I think it is, it shouldn't be an issue. And it will depend on what the developers do, i.e. third parties, because we know Nintendo's not going to have a problem with this. They design the hardware. The third parties will have to manage their resources with regard to how it's going to run, whether they decide to manage their art assets to work in lower resolutions or whatever they need to do to make sure that it runs perfectly in, say, 720p instead of 1080p as far as a render target goes. So if that's the case, then it should be almost indistinguishable, because it's the console itself is going to upscale it to 1080p anyway when you plug it to the TV, and there will be no difference if the console is going to be a 720p screen if you develop for that. So 4 gigs of RAM is more than enough. We saw 1080p being just fine with only 1 gig of RAM for games with regard to Wii U. Granted, not too many games were in 1080p native, but the few that were looked pretty good.
Yeah, I think there was.
Can I add some more to that?
Oh, go ahead.
Now I gotta remember what I was gonna add. I had it right before I said that. It slipped my mind.
That's okay. You'll think of it. But before we end, if you think about it, let me know. I did want to add.
Now I remember. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
From my memory, I'm not looking at any Google search. I probably should have. The OS is using about 2 gigs of the 8 gig. So how low level do Nintendo need to be for it not to be a problem?
I guess that'll depend.
I mean, from what I know, ShadowFox, maybe you can correct me on this or not. Doesn't the Shield, like the NVIDIA, Shield Android box TV or whatever that thing is, that OS, that uses 1 gigabyte or less, if I'm not correct. It has 3 gigabytes of RAM and it uses 1 or less, and the OS blows away the Wii U's OS as far as just how fast it is, how you can back out of games. You have the GeForce experience on there. It does streaming. There are so many different things that you can do with it. It's so much more sleek than the Wii U's OS. And I think that uses 1 gigabyte, if I'm not correct. Maybe someone in the comment section can correct me. But Shadow Fox, do you know anything about that?
I'm not really sure on the footprint. I mean, I could look it up while we're talking, but I don't. I'm fairly sure it can't be that big. Like modern OSs don't really need much more than 2 gigs of RAM. Really, at some point it becomes an issue with regard to how big individual applications you're running need memory. Obviously, you could run Windows 10 with 2 gigs of RAM. It's possible, but don't expect to run Photoshop. It won't even open. So it's just, what do you plan to do within the range of the OS? Obviously, if it's going to be a very custom OS, no matter how stripped down it is, if you're doing things like, I don't know, video conferencing or hosting large files or having a virtual instance of all the games that you're running, similar to what the Wii U does for Virtual Console and what Xbox One and PlayStation 4 do for individual games. Those types of things take up a memory footprint, and it's going to be pretty big. So if those type of features are going to be there, that will be the indicator of how large the OS will be. The kernel itself obviously is not going to be big if it's going to be based on the Android kernel, but as far as different features that'll be added on top of that, I don't really have a clear answer for that. We won't know until we see more of what the OS looks like and what the system can do.
Yeah, like a lot of people in the comment section are saying like NVIDIA's OSs are super light. Yeah, like I said, I'm pretty sure like that Shield box or whatever the heck I was watching, that's like 500, I think it's 500 megabytes or it's 1 gigabyte for that thing. And it's super fast and sleek. I mean, it has a ton of features. So we're going to have to wait and see. But yeah, you're right. There's lots of customizations that need to be done. And like, Nia, the video gamer, says that NVIDIA services barely use any resources on her PC. I can contest to that. I have the GeForce experience on my PC, and it uses almost nothing for the GeForce experience. And that has pretty much everything you could think of, from, game capture to the messages to all that good stuff. So yeah, I think overall, I mean, obviously there's some concerns just based on Nintendo's track record on those things, but overall, we're just gonna have to, I guess, wait and see on that one. So, was there anything else you wanted to add to this? I mean, we're pretty much at the end here. I think everyone kind of got what they needed to get out. We got some clarification on your end, Antonio, and I want to say, thank you for doing that. But was there anything else you wanted to add on this end?
Okay, I can. Well, this will probably be more addressed to the commenters and everybody who's watching or listening.
Okay.
Just because somebody criticizes Nintendo doesn't mean they hate Nintendo. I personally don't think the majority of gamers hate Nintendo. I just think we're talking different languages. We want different things for Nintendo. And I think both count. Well, I'm not going to say both counts because there's multiple counts. I just think multiple games need to come together and see if we can find some middle ground. Because at the end of the day, we're all gamers.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the thing. I mean, I think it goes all sorts of ways with that, because just because someone likes Nintendo doesn't mean, they hate other systems or they hate other things. Like, I mean, I don't know how many times people tell me, oh, all you do is play Nintendo. You don't have anything else. Oh, look at your channel. All it is Nintendo. And then I'm like, no, you idiot. Here's my PS4. Here's my Xbox One. Here's my PC. Like, stop it. Like, I even got a Vita. That thing, it's dusty, but I got one. So, I mean, that's the thing. I think overall, I like your message, though. I agree. Like, when it comes down to it, it just comes down to just coming together as gamers. And yeah, obviously you want the best for a company, but I think people just think different ways as far as what Nintendo's going to do. And I think also, and I've said this before, I think there's some overcomplication. Nintendo made a system that combines their console and their portable. I mean, the complaints, which there was tons of them, was that we're tired of buying games on 3DS and we're tired of buying games on Wii U. Like, we want more games. Like, every time a game came out for the 3DS, somebody would say, why isn't that on Wii U? Every time a game comes out for the Wii U, they would say, why isn't that on 3DS? And then you look at the 3DS's library, how it has Fire Emblem and Pokemon and Monster Hunter and all these games like Persona Q and Shin Megami Tensei and Bravely Default. And you're like, why isn't all that on Wii U? And with the Nintendo Switch, we're going to get that. So That's like the biggest thing, you know, that I'm seeing with this system, and people are just trying to make it more complicated than it actually is, because that was one of the major complaints. I mean, I can contest to that, whether it was from my website or whether it was on comment sections of just games that were released for the 3DS on Nintendo's YouTube channel. There were people just complaining anytime they talked about a 3DS game. Nintendo Ultra, who's in the chat here, he's a mod. He was one of the funniest ones that did a skit on that, where they talked about a Nintendo Direct that Nintendo did, I think like in 2014 or 2015, and he was like, "Oh yeah, here's one Wii U game, and here's like," and he started throwing 3DS games at the camera, because like it seemed like all they were talking about was 3DS. So you're going to eliminate that with this system. So that's the biggest thing, you know. Shadow Fox, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that as well?
Well, while I was looking, the Tegra X1 in the Shield console came with 3 gigs of RAM, so take that as you will. But as far as the takeaways from this, I see that it's very clear now that there are quite a few people out there with a large amount of followers. Be to those individuals, those large amount of followers, be true to yourself. Don't. I guess more of the problem what I have is that we know, number one, these are rumors, so we can't treat them as fact. But the few things that were divulged in those rumors, people are making extreme leaps in logic and making very big assumptions based on a couple of choice words they decided to cherry pick from insert media here that decided to go over this information. If you don't understand it, just say you don't understand it. Trying to take a comparison that somebody else made and try to make your own comparisons and then make complaints about it, even though you don't understand it, that's oh my God, an infernal thought process. Mm-hmm. I hate to say it. At the end of the day, do you play games to have fun or to impress other people? 4 gigs of RAM is not going to give you more or less fun. And you don't know what's going to happen until you start to see games. Because that's what we're here for, right?
Well,
that's all I got to say, really.
No, no, I'm joking. I'm completely joking. Yeah, obviously, like, games are the biggest thing. And that's why I think for me, like I've been saying to people, I'm like, hey, look, I haven't said like, oh, no, the specs are okay or anything like that, or the specs are this. I'm just like, hey, guys, we know what we think what the power range is going to be. I'm not surprised, disappointed, happy, or sad. I'm waiting to see the games. Now, if everyone's saying this system is so weak, it's so horrible, it's the worst thing in the world, well, when the Nintendo Switch is unveiled, there's going to be some third-party games that are on PS4 and Xbox One, you know, that are on the Nintendo Switch. So those games, since this system is so weak and so horrible, like some people are saying it, those people with large followers, then it should run like trash, right?
It should, or you know. But then we'll see a perfect version of it on the iPhone next year. So, you know, clearly it wasn't scalable enough to be on Nintendo's hardware. But I'll stop trolling.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so I just want people to be patient. If you think the system, the specs are so bad, it's just trash, it's just not going to be able to compete. There's going to be games on PS4 and Xbox One that aren't on PS3 and Xbox 360 that come to the Nintendo Switch. So those games, based on what these people are saying, should run and look really, really, really bad. So let's wait to see that then. Because that's based on clock speeds. See, and that's one of the big issues that I have, is that I think we need to wait and see as well. Let's see how the games run. Wii U was a fair comparison because sometimes you saw some games, well, they actually ran worse, but I think the developers didn't optimize as good as they could have. But we didn't see a lot of games that were only like on PS4 and Xbox One come to the Nintendo Wii U. But with this system, the Switch, based on what developers are saying, based on some of the different things like Bethesda, they've completely 180'd, you know, from what they said about the Wii U compared to what they said about the Switch. Bethesda trashed the Wii U from the very beginning, but not with the Nintendo Switch. They're very positive on it, and they've said nothing but good things. And that's Pete Hines, the vice president, and that's also Todd Howard, you know. So both of the big guys at Bethesda have completely 180'd about this system. So I want to see what the secret sauce is. I want to know why they've done that this time compared to last time. And because that's the big thing that I hear about, people come to my channel and say, oh, well, all developers said good things about the Wii U beforehand, and look how that turned out. And I'm like, no, go back and look at what Bethesda said on the Wii U. They were pretty blatant on how bad they felt the system was.
They were not part of the product reel. They are now.
Yeah, they were not part of that. They are at this point. But I still think at the end, I think it comes down to sales. I think if the Wii U sold well, it'd be a different story. Just like for example, guys, I mean, do you guys really think the Wii would have got as much support it got if it didn't sell like 100 million units? You know, obviously developers put games on the Wii, whether them being GIMP ports or not, because it sold well. If it, you know, so
they were forced to, because developers were talking trash about the Wii before it came out too. So it kind of flew in the face of them, and they were forced to develop stuff for it, literally.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. But I also remember in the forums during that time, a lot of consumers was not happy with those ports.
Yeah,
you had to make a completely different game for it. So
yeah,
Call of Duty 4 was actually great.
Are you talking about the Wii?
For the original Wii, yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think some of the ports were definitely not very high quality. Usually the best games as far as third party goes that were on the Wii were the ones that were made for the ground up for the Wii. You know, would be like the Red Steel 2,
Zack and Wiki.
Yeah, Zack and Wiki, Mirror Moss of the Demon Blade, Resident Evil, any of the Resident Evil games, Umbrella Chronicles, Dark Side Chronicles, any of those games. There's very rarely actual games that were like that tried to act like the PS3 and 360 that were better on the Wii, which of course, I mean, the Wii was nowhere near as strong. I think the only game that I can think of was maybe like the Force Unleashed. The Wii version was actually might have been better than the PS3 and 360 version because the technical issues in those games were just ridiculous.
Yeah, kind of bad.
Yeah, the Wii, I played both of them. I played the Wii version of the Force Unleashed, and I played the 360 and the PS3 version. And the Wii version, in my opinion, is the best version because it just doesn't have anywhere near the amount of technical problems, frame rate issues, and problems those versions have. So that might be the only one that I can think of. There might be another one here or there, but yeah, for the most part, yeah, pretty bad on the Wii when it came to those things. But that's why you saw a lot of unique games that were just basically ground up for the Wii that performed well, that did okay. I think there was also like a Dead Space game too that I really liked.
It's really good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Then they put it on the PS3 too. I played it on there as well. It was also good on the PS3 as well. So, all right, guys, I think we don't really have any. We're not going to take any questions tonight. It's a little late for you guys in the East Coast. Pretty sure everyone got
yeah, and I gotta go to work early in the morning.
I know I gotta go to work early, but for me, it's not even 8 o'clock yet, so it's a little bit different for me. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. I want to thank you, Antonio, for having the cojones to actually come on here. You wouldn't be, or you'd be surprised how many people run away from just a normal debate or talk, and you need to be commended for actually coming on. And you were very respectful. So
definitely.
Definitely. So thank you for coming on and sharing your opinion and how you feel. Because I think there's probably a lot of people out there that feel the same way as you as far as, beforehand. So good stuff there on your end. And I also want to say, ShadowFox, thank you so much for coming out. I really do appreciate it. And guys, I don't think, Antonio, you don't have a YouTube, do you?
No.
Okay.
I've thought about creating one, but if you hear my voice, that's not a good idea.
Dude, no, it's okay. You actually sound a lot like King Avery. You're good. You actually sound a lot like him, and he has over 5,000 subscribers. So no, you're good, man. Your voice is fine. It's not a problem. Just make one. If you want to make one, make one. But if you're going to make a YouTube channel, make sure you do what you like to do, because too many times people make YouTube channels in order to try to make money as quick as possible, and you end up flaming out and not doing good. So if you do make a YouTube, make what you want, make the type of content you want. Don't make videos just to try to, make money on YouTube, because that for me, from what I've seen, that never works. And ShadowFox, where can people find you, man?
ShadowFox Prime, the real ShadowFoxInfinite. You can find me on YouTube, Twitter, wherever on social media. It doesn't really matter. Insert console here. Insert PC platform here. I'm pretty much everywhere. I list all my gamer tags and everything on my channel. So
got it.
Go ahead. Just go YouTube.com/ShadowFoxInfinite. You'll see me there.
I was going to just add to that. Sorry to cut you off. I was going to add to that. I'm going to actually add your channel I'm going to add your channel to my list of partners, and I'm also going to put a link to ShadowFox's channel in the description below and in the comment section once this uploads to YouTube. So you guys go make sure you subscribe to ShadowFox. I mean, I know he doesn't do as much content, but when he does do content, it's actually really, really, really good. So make sure you subscribe to his channel, guys. Go check it out. He definitely deserves way more subscribers than he has, because obviously, as you guys have heard, he's pretty good with this tech, and you know, he makes content enough to where he should have more subscribers. So please make sure you subscribe to his channel and hear what he has to say on different things. All right, guys, I think that wraps it up here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Thank you, two gentlemen, for joining me, and we will see you guys at the next video and the next debate. Peace out, guys.